still hasn't come through.
Well, it should do by now, I hope.
One post needs approval. That's going to be you. Okay, you're live.
Lovely. Okay, good morning, everybody. Morning to Laurel. I've just spoken to a couple of minutes ago. Here we are at Laurel Leaf Networking. And Laurel, thank you very much for organising my second Facebook Live event of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, some of you will be wanting to write into me. You can do that by sending me a text to the number underneath 0778 035 735. If you've got any questions about sales. Today is going to be about preparing for sales, and that is going to cover a number of things, whether it's sales appointments, networking, demonstrations, and also at exhibitions as well. If you want to text me, or text me, just go there. If you want to tweet me, I'm here basically. I hope you can see that at the Sales Rainmaker. Just send me a tweet with your question, and I'll do my best to answer it for you. Okay, October has been a very interesting month for two reasons. We're virtually in November. 2017 will effectively finish in around about 3 or 4 weeks' time before the silly season starts. So if you've got end of year targets to try and do and create, then really you've got about 3 or 4 weeks left, because you know it's like in December, people tend to put things off until January or February of the new year. 2018, it sounds as good. I don't know where the years have gone, I don't know about you, but this year has been an interesting one. And I feel as though that people need to raise their game a little bit. I've been involved in 4 major activities this year. I go networking, I do sales appointments, I see sales appointments, I see presentations, and I see people how they present themselves. I really think it's important that we stick to the absolute fundamentals. There's no point learning all the ins and outs of technical sales in terms of selling processes or selling methodologies if you don't get the basics right. And by that, what I mean is this: is that you've got to be professional. If you're not professional, no one's going to take you seriously. Let's just go back to the beginning of this month. The Prime Minister got into all sorts of trouble at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester. She had a coughing fit. Now, these things can and do happen, but I can't help thinking that had she not had 25 media interviews the day beforehand and 2 dinners the night beforehand, she may have been in better shape to deliver what really could have been the most important speech of her political career so far. Instead of which, she got into a coughing and a spluttering fit. Now, if you're susceptible to that, and if you know you're susceptible to that, there are certain precautions you can take. Certainly, eating correctly, sleeping correctly, making sure you're well rested and well saturated as well. Have lots of water, not immediately beforehand, but make sure that you've got enough water on board. Not so much that you will continue want to go to the toilet every 5 minutes during your speech or presentation, but it's really important that you are hydrated correctly. That's one thing. I think in the Prime Minister's situation, I don't think she'd rested enough, and I think she was a little bit on the tired side. And when you're tired, your neck muscles can go into spasm, your shoulder muscles become tight, and the whole sort of diaphragm and breathing scenario becomes upset. It's much better if you were to take proper rest and take adequate water, as I'm doing on this Facebook Live right now. Please excuse me. So if you know you've got a presentation coming up, whether it's a product demonstration or a speech or some sort of presentation of networking group, just make sure you're doing the professional thing by being properly prepared. And I think the number one thing really is to make sure you've got enough sleep the night before. Even if you're doing something in an afternoon or an evening performance, it's important to get the correct amount of rest. Now, there are obviously other tips to speaking, and they are really these. I mentioned these in some of my Sales Rainmaker videos. And it really is important when you're speaking that you slow right down. Now, some of you may have heard this before, but I'll repeat it again because it is important. If you take the time out to turn on the news at 10 o'clock in the evening or throughout the day, you'll notice that the newscasters speak at around about 100 or 110 words per minute. Whereas in normal speech, we tend to speak at about 140 or 150 words. It's much better to be deliberately slow and speak smoothly than gabble your words. You just won't get heard. The other important thing here is to make sure that you use the pause correctly. You know, the human brain, as I mentioned last time, my previous Facebook Live, is a very difficult and a very complicated piece of kit. It can only take in a certain amount of information at any one time. So if you make a statement in a sales pitch or a sales presentation, make sure that you pause afterwards. For example, hi, I'm Jeremy Jacobs. I offer sales workshops and face-to-face mentoring as well. I have 2 workshops. One is half a day, one is full day. That is more likely to get to sink into someone's brain than if I were to garble my message. So the overall tip here for preparation on speeches and pitches is to slow down, use the pause, make sure you're well rested, well hydrated and properly fed. Because the important thing about giving speeches is that if you run out of glucose, and as I mentioned in my last Facebook Live, you'll get tired and your brain won't function properly. You have to eat beforehand correctly. Not too much, but just enough to make sure that you're running on all 4 cylinders. Okay, on 3 or 4 occasions this year, I've been to some business exhibitions, and there are numerous stands, and I don't know. I think standards have dropped over the past few years. When I was back on the sales force, you would be in real trouble if you turned up to the stand with a tie that finished 3 or 4 inches above your waist, or your hair was disheveled, or you were seen eating, or God forbid even smoking on the stand. You have to be very professional. And yet I find nowadays when I go to some of these exhibitions, people don't shake your hand properly, or they ask you a closed question, just like in the shop, can I help you, sir or madam? Well, all that's going to mean is either a yes or a no, and most times it's nearly a no, because people don't have the time to engage on exhibition stands. It's much better that you perform like a professional car salesperson at a Rolls-Royce or a Mercedes-Benz showroom. Take a real interest in what people are coming onto your stand for. It's also really important to avoid gimmicks, in my opinion. Most places seem to have pens and sweets. I mean, as children we were told, don't take sweets from strangers. So don't put them on there. It's not terribly good. It's not very original or unique. Try and think of something else. If you're going to have a sort of giveaway, make sure there's something really different you can offer, or something which is useful, like a calendar or a notebook, or something really special which the client or potential client can remember you for. But the important thing is to don't be offhand when you're on a exhibition stand, but yet don't be too over eager or keen as well to get people into your stand. It's about finding that balance and being professional and asking people exactly, or thanking them for coming onto your stand, and asking them by using open questions how you can help. So that's a little bit about exhibiting, or rather how not to exhibit yourself. Moving on now to networking. Now, networking is very, very important for people who are freelancers and for those in the corporate world as well. One of the best books on networking I could recommend to you is this one here by a friend of mine. Here we are, Business Networking, The Survival Guide by Will Kintish. How to make networking less about stress and more about success. A wonderful title, and I'll mention the book again to you a little bit later on, but it is available on Amazon and through all good booksellers, I'm sure. There are certain things in the networking environment that really have slightly annoyed me this year. I think on 3 separate occasions, I've had to turn to someone to my left or to my right and to say, excuse me, I'm actually having a private conversation with this person. I'll see you in a few minutes. And this is because the person, who just sort of creeps up from either side or behind your shoulder is unaware of a technique which Will mentions in his book called the closed 2 or 3 or group of 4. When people are engaged in conversation and their body language suggests that it could be awkward to interrupt, don't just bowl in there. Take your time. Wait for someone to beckon you into the conversation if that's what they want to do. It really is annoying and irritating when people just come up on the left-hand side and basically just try and interrupt your conversation. It's unprofessional, and really it's also very rude indeed. Now, the other thing which I find irritating and annoying as well in networking are people's lack of ability to express who they are and what they do properly. Now, I'm not a great lover of these formulaic 60-second pitches, but try at the very least to give some indication of who you are and what you do. I think the one bit of advice I like to give to anybody who goes to networking regularly is that whatever you do, don't say something which will elicit a so what. For example, hello, I'm John Smith. I'm with ABC Accountants in the High Street. We've been there for 35 years and my father did this and all the rest of it. It's not about you, and it's about them. I mean, I don't care whether you've been there in 35 years or 335 years. What I need to know is what I can do for me. I'm the potential client. I don't care whether you've been there 35 years or 5 minutes. I want to hear something that's going to engage me. So think about your pitch. Think about what you're going to say. If you've got any concerns about that, please drop me a line. I'm not saying I'm the networking king or the presentation king, but at least I know how to sort of engage with people properly and correctly at networking. The other thing about networking, which again is a real bugbear of mine, is the business card, or sometimes the lack of a business card. It really is important that you have these. I know there are some people who go and say, well, actually, I don't have business cards. I've got such an unusual name. People just Google me. Well, I'm sorry, life isn't like that. You can't be as arrogant as that. It's really important, though, that your business card looks professional and is professional. Someone just tweeted me, can we see yours, Jeremy? Yes, of course you can in a few minutes. But business cards really have to give some basic information. You would be surprised that sometimes it's very, very difficult to read people's names on business cards. I've got 1 or 2 examples here. This gentleman, who I know very well indeed, nice chap, a lawyer, Jonathan Silverman, ever such a nice guy. I don't know if you can see it there, can you? Perhaps you can't with this. There we are. I'll try and get it to the screen a little bit. It's okay. But look what's on the back. Nothing. It doesn't cost you any more to have something printed on the back particularly. It's not terribly expensive. So if you've got something to say about your business, put something on the back. A friend of mine, Peter Grundy, he lives in Kent. He also does business in the Middle East. And I don't know if you can see there, he's got his offices on one side of the card in Bahrain, and on the other side, which is really useful when he's in the UK, he has his London address. Really useful doing that. Notice how big his name is to the rest of the card, and also his logo isn't particularly overbearing. I think the important thing with cards is that they look professional. All right, somebody asked for mine. Here is my sales Rainmaker card. On the back, what I've done here is actually explain to people exactly what I do and how I can help them. I put a couple of thought pieces there. Selling anything as an emotional component, don't ignore it. And without sales, there is no business. Try and be a little bit inventive, but don't try and go over the top. There's a lady here. I'm not a great lover of this. The colour's a bit weird. And lovely woman actually, Ruth Ferenga. I met her. She's based in Hertfordshire. But again, it's good. It's got a business. It's got one telephone number, and her Facebook and website and so on. I think the worst thing you can do with a business card is to give something which is like a flimsy piece of paper. These are the sorts of things you can download from the internet. If you're going to have business cards, invest in something which is really good. go for something which is at least 350 or 400 GSM. Don't go for flimsy cards. It looks unprofessional, it doesn't look right, and it creates the wrong impression. And that applies to pamphlets as well. If you've got an A4 pamphlet or an A5 pamphlet, try and put it onto a cardstock rather than something really flimsy. So in a nutshell, make sure your name stands out. There's mine here on my other brand, Cherubie Jacobs. You can just about see there. I think there's another one here, which is good. Don't use strange and wacky colours. Use primary colours. Use corporate colours. Something which gives you a degree of gravitas, and so on. Okay, that's business cards and networking. I think the final piece this morning is about how does one prepare for a sales appointment. Now, unless you're in high ticket, complicated business to business sales, you really, where I think you need to understand strategies and procurement of your prospective customer. If you're dealing with a smallish organization who can make decisions quickly, there's a lot you have to do. Now, depending on why you've been called in to a sales appointment, it may have been from a previous appointment or a phone call or a letter or something. Before you even go there, you really have to do your research. There's nothing worse than salespeople pitching up, and I've been on the buying side of the desk as well, where a salesperson really hasn't got a clue about the company they're trying to sell something to. It is absolutely key. You take time out and really research what your customer's business is all about, whether it's in engineering, aircraft manufacturing, book publishing, anything. Find out as much as you possibly can about the business, because people don't want to sit there and be hounded by questions about how many people you employ. They expect that in the day of the internet age, that you would understand that and have a good idea. So, and also try and figure out where the issues are. You may find something about your company or prospective customer in the local newspaper. Sometimes you can find information about companies in the business library. And for those of you who get into central London, the City Business Library near Guildhall, or rather next to Guildhall, is a very good source. The Institute Directors has a good source. Probably the best, though, is the British Library just next to St Pancras Station. You can go into the reference section. You don't need to have a ticket. You can go in and basically ask for the reference section. But it really is important to make sure that you know about your client's business as much as you possibly can, and then really figure out what is it you want to get out of that sales meeting. Now, the obvious answer really is probably to get an order. Now, it doesn't always happen on a first appointment, but it can happen. So all I'm saying is be prepared to get an order, and if you can't get an order, at least put yourself in a position where you can progress to an order, either at the next appointment or perhaps after a product demonstration or something. So the second point is get an objective. The third thing is to find out who you're seeing. It may be that you're seeing a director of the company, but even a director of the company may not have the final say in buying your goods or services. Always ask sensibly whether that person is in, or whether there are other people involved in the decision-making process. There's nothing worse than offending someone and suggesting they're not important enough to give you the business. Be tactful. Find out. Also find out how long it's going to take. There are some organisations, whether it's government departments or local authorities and other institutions, can take a year, 18 months, or even 2 years to make a decision. But in most business-to-business transactions, it can be a few days or perhaps a few weeks. Sometimes your client may need to get sanction from another country or another director based in another country to place your order. Again, it's important to find out all these sorts of things before you do that. But getting down to absolute brass tacks, the number one thing about selling is to really find out what the customer's pain is. Now, I know we've all heard this wonderful expression. It's asking tactful questions of your client and how your product or service can alleviate his or her problems. So it really is drilling down and finding out exactly what the situation is in your particular field. It depends obviously what you're selling. I was involved for many years in the sale of office equipment, capital equipment, which can run into thousands, if not tens of thousands of pounds, and you really had to find out exactly, what the bottlenecks were, if they had the wrong type of integrated copier or computer system, how things were interrupting their workflow, how they would be affecting their staff, and so on. So there's a whole load of issues you can ask. You can also possibly ask them how it affects, and of course you've got to be careful there because you don't want to get too familiar too quickly, but you really ought to find out exactly how issues are affecting the person you're trying to sell to. How is it affecting their stress levels? How is it affecting the number of hours they're having to work to sort out extra problems? Basically, what are the implications of the current situation they find themselves in? And once you've done that, and once you've got agreement to move forward, then and only then can you move into your offering. Far too many salespeople are product or service led. Really, the product or the service and how it can improve your client's business really should be the last thing. A bit like a final proof. So, on my courses at the Sales Rainmaker, we cover these sorts of issues. We go through systematically what you should be asking, what you shouldn't be asking, making sure you've got your tactics right, and also practicing how you should be asking questions. We do sort of role play sessions, which a lot of delegates do find quite fun. And you have to keep on practicing these until you get good at it. Which really brings me on to, I think, my final point of this morning's Facebook Live. And that is, I suppose, CPD, continual professional development. Selling and the art of selling, and really science, because I think it's both, is a profession. And just like the law or accountancy or medicine, it takes tremendous investment and tremendous knowledge over many years. It's not about going to sales school for 2 or 3 or 4 years. It's about gaining experience over decades. And so really I'd like to ask you all this question. If you are in sales or in business, what is it you're doing to up your knowledge? Now, sometimes there has to be sales knowledge. If you're business owners, it's not just sales knowledge, it's also financial knowledge, it's industry knowledge, it's networking and presentation skill knowledge. There's a whole gamut of things that we have to do on an ongoing basis to become professional. So I'd positively encourage you to learn as much as you can, speak to as many people as you can, and read exciting books. One of my best mates, Jeff Birch, you may know him actually from a television series he did years ago. Jeff wrote a lovely book called Irresistible Persuasion. It's Birch with U-R-C-H, not Birch as in B-I-R-C-H. Jeff Birch, it's the Irresistible Persuasion. Again, available from most good booksellers and most online at Amazon and so on. It is interesting, full of lots and lots of good tips. And really, my final words in parting is this: learn as much as you possibly can about sales. If you want to find out more about my courses, just go to, or just give me a call, number behind me here, or go to my website, which is www.thesalesrainmaker.co.uk /workshops. Drop me a line to jeremy@thesalesrainmaker.co.uk, and or indeed tweet at the Sales Rainmaker. For those of you sort of coming in late now, I think we've got it here somewhere, just give me a tweet to the Sales Rainmaker. I have another tweet from someone here. They're sort of saying, Jeremy, what's the worst thing you've done in sales? Oh dear. I'm sure I've committed every possible cardinal sin there is over the years. There's no one particular one, but saying, I suppose, having said that, one could always, I seem to remember a situation many years ago when a deal was agreed. It was, I think about 20 odd copiers, and unbeknown to me, these machines were sent out before the paperwork had been completely arranged and sorted and agreed to by both parties. So the machines went out on like a trial basis. Some stayed there, but unfortunately, halfway through the process, before all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, the company concerned went into administration. We lost half the equipment and an awful lot of money. It cost my regional sales director his job. So, you know, in selling and in business, really, you have to be thorough. Make sure everything is okay and working well before you send equipment out. Perhaps that's the next Facebook Live. I've been Jeremy Jacobs, the Sales Rainmaker. Laura, once again, thank you very much for facilitating this Facebook Live. I'm looking forward to the next Laurel Leaf event. I think there's one coming up on December the 7th. And I also look forward to engaging and speaking to as many of you as possible over the next few weeks about my various offerings and so on. That's been me, Jeremy Jacobs, the Sales Rainmaker. I look forward to seeing from you soon. Cheers. Oh, one final question, which is really good. I think it's from a lady called Jane. Jane is saying, my son wants to go into direct sales. What else can he learn at university? I think she's doing a business degree. Well, any sort of business degree would be useful, but I think there's nothing better than practical experience. I would recommend that once your son, Jane, gets his degree, then look at what opportunities. There are some great organisations out there that want top flight salespeople, and nowadays they're looking for business graduates. Salespeople nowadays have to be more savvy, more aware, and more psychologically aware as well of the people they're trying to do business with. So selling is a great profession to get into, and it's something you can always earn money from. I hope that answers your question, Jane. No more. Okay, thanks ever so much. It's been a pleasure, and I'll be in touch, I hope again very, very soon. Thank you very much indeed.